Well, howdy folks, welcome back. Hey, today I wanted to talk to you about pressure canning, okay? And this is about the different pressures that are used at different altitudes. Why do we use different pressures at different altitudes? And it's just like me. I can't just read something like, their little pressure canning guide here, where it says, you have to be doing things at this altitude, and at that altitude you have to have this amount of pressure. It's not good enough for me just to know that. I need to know why. I always ask why. Why is this? Why is that? Who, what, when, where, why, and how about every little detail of everything. So I'm asking myself, well, if it takes 10 pounds of pressure to do pressure canning at sea level, why does it take 15 pounds of pressure if you're at 10,000 feet? Why? Okay, well, that's because there's a pressure differential, they'll tell you. Yeah, it's because at sea level you have a higher pressure than you do at high altitude. So you have to increase the pressure in the pot. And that leaves me with yet another question. Why? And so in researching this, I had to find out why that was. And I did that research and I found out. And the why on that is water doesn't boil at 212 degrees. Even though it boils at 212 degrees, it doesn't. That doesn't make sense, does it? Let me explain something to you. The higher you go in altitude, the lower the temperature that water boils at. Okay, and I did a little research on this just to make sure I could get good, accurate numbers for you. So if you're all the way up at 10,000 feet, now there's a little town, you might say, who's at 10,000 feet? Okay, Colorado, go to Leadville. Leadville is at 10,158 feet. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? It takes water will boil there at 200 and, no, I'm wrong. I'm looking at the wrong number. Water boils in Leadville at 193 degrees. I thought I was saying something backward there. 193 degrees at 10,000 feet. Wow. Well, that's a lot lower than the 212 degrees that you hear about that water boils at, which is what water boils at sea level. Okay, so it takes, water will boil at a higher temperature, or another way of saying it, water does not come to a boil until a higher temperature if you're at sea level than it would if you're at a higher altitude. So, this is why they say food takes longer to cook at altitude. You have to compensate or adjust your cooking time for altitude. And that's true. The higher you go, the longer it takes to bake that cake. And why? Because water doesn't boil at such a high temperature. It boils at a lower temperature at altitude. And so it takes longer to cook the foods because they're not as hot. Wow. Therein lies what's going on with this. Okay. We have to raise the temperature in this to 240 degrees. All right. Now, if I've got 212 degree water, then it's easier to do that than if I have 193 degree water. Okay. Because that extra pressure with the steam will create higher temperatures. That's the way that works. The higher the pressure, the higher the temperature. Just like boiling water at sea level. It's a higher pressure at sea level, so it's a higher temperature to boil the water. Imagine that. And as a result of this, so if you're like in Amarillo, and in Amarillo we're here at 3,671 feet. And that's about 3,500 feet higher than Dallas, where I was living here in Texas prior. Now, in Amarillo, it's 205 degrees is what water boils at. Okay? So if you've ever had like a cooking thermometer and you wanted to test its accuracy in boiling water and it came up to something other than 212, it wasn't the accuracy of your thermometer. It was probably your altitude. Isn't that nice to know? Now you know why it did that. Okay? So this thing back here, if I want to pressure cook at a higher altitude, that means I need a higher pressure to achieve the 240 degrees that's needed to safely can these products, these low acid items. So That answered that wonderful question. Okay, now there's also the question of what if you're water bath canning? If you're water bath canning and you're depending on the water to be 212 degrees, but you're at altitude so it won't get to 212 degrees, what do you do then? Because there is no pressure to deal with. Well, in water bath canning, it's about time, ladies and gentlemen. So in water bath canning, we use time and we extend that time at higher altitudes. Let me give you some information, and this is from the manual for this very pot, and this is from the Presto Corporation. They said your altitude chart for pressure canning is going to be an altitude of 2,001 to 4,000 feet. You're going to need, 7 pounds of pressure, and that is for doing syrups and canning. And there's other things like that, but the thing of it is down here it's the altitude chart for boiling water canning fruits, and the different altitudes will equal different minutes, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes added to the processing time. So let's say you're processing peaches and it says to process them in the size of jar that you're using, to process them for 30 minutes. Okay, and I'm just throwing out numbers here. These aren't accurate figures. Then you, at your altitude, might need to add an extra 15 minutes for your higher altitude, depending on your altitude. So it's going to vary. All right, so you need those charts that come in these little books. Hang on to those things. And also when you're talking about the pressure that you're working with, when you're pressure canning low acid items like this at sea level, you do it at 10 pounds of pressure. But if you're at high altitude, you do it at 15 pounds of pressure. Where I'm at, I'm supposed to use 12 pounds of pressure. I use a little higher pressure because I like to process at a slightly higher temperature. It gives me a safety margin, if you know what I mean. I want a little higher temperature, a little more safety. So I process at about 245 degrees rather than 240. That way I make sure I kill everything. It's just being a little more fastidious about it. That and the fact that my altitude at 3671 above sea level is close to the 4,000 foot cutoff mark for the next pressure up, which would be 13 psi. So I just go ahead and process at 13.5, and I make sure of where I'm at and what I'm doing. That way I get the extra temperature I want. So I'm at 13.5 psi and above that I process at, and that's in Amarillo. Where you're at, it'll be different, okay? And you're gonna have to do the numbers on it. But remember, the reason you're processing at a higher temperature at higher altitude is because your water is boiling at a lower temperature. And the reason you have to water bath can for longer at a higher altitude is because the water boils at a lower temperature. It's the same reason for both, all right? Your water isn't as hot. My water's not as hot, so I have to cook for longer or higher pressure. So in here, it's not about the, well, it is about the length of time. You have to hold it for the right length of time at the right pressure. So once I achieve, you achieve, or anybody achieves the correct pressure for you, then that's when you start your little timer. So these took me 30 minutes, these carrots, all right? Now, to do those, I had to use 13.5 psi, all right? And I did not start my 30-minute timer until I reached 13.5 psi. Once it hit that pressure, I started my timer. Even though it was already cooking and heating up in the thing for the entire time it took to get to that pressure, I don't start the timer until then. And because that is not about cooking the product near as much as it is about getting the right temperature to the very center of that jar. I need 240 degrees in the center of that jar, and it takes X number of minutes at the right pressure, all right? So when we start, our time matters, and the pressure that we're using matters big time. Now you might be saying, well, I don't have a pressure gauge. Mine just has a simple spout like this one right in the middle. Mine is a 16 quart. That's great. Hey, if you've got the 16 quart, you're already safe. It is designed so that when it's in operation, the little weight that sits on the pipe will start rocking when it's cooking at the right temperature. So when it starts rocking back and forth, side to side, that's when you start your timer. And that little rocking motion tells you the thing is at 15 psi. So you're processing at a really high temperature. You're getting things safe, okay? Me, I don't mind processing at a higher temperature. In fact, I've done that with this very unit. I processed these at 15 psi, okay? They came out just wonderful. So, all kinds of different stuff that you can do. You see, I did a beef stew, potatoes, corned beef, some poblanos, carrots, some red jalapeno here. Ladies and gentlemen, I got some good stuff all ready to go into whatever I'm cooking. For those seasons when I can't get good poblanos, I can just reach in and grab a can or two of my poblanos and make whatever dish that I want to make. It's delicious that way. And I don't have to worry about getting somebody else's cruddy green chilies that's got stems, seeds, and peels in it. Ick, or skin, I should say, not peel. Yeah, and I see that stuff in those canned chilies all the time. Yuck, I don't want that. I get better quality if I do my own work. All right, there it is. Different altitudes, different temperature. You didn't know your water boiled at a lower temperature, did you? Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. Click the like button. That helps me more than you can imagine in placements for other people. So click that. And also, if you would, the comment down below. If you have any questions, comments, any ideas for me, let me know. Pretty soon, I'm going to be doing some canning in front of you, showing you exactly how I use this machine and the process that I go through to get my canned process done. I wanted to learn this whole process in front of you and show you how I investigate things and learn things and question things. I question everything. Why is this? Why is that? I want to know why I do something before I just do it. It's like, why do I wash these? Well, you wash these, or boil them. They say to boil them in a lot of recipes. Well, you do that to get rid of the yeasts and molds and anything that might be on there. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? That's what this is for, and it's going to be hotter than the boiling water you'd put these in. So that makes no sense to boil them, does it? No, because you're dealing with higher pressures here. So I question, why would I have to do that if I'm processing at a higher temperature? And I found out there's no reason to. That was something they came up with from way back when people would recycle lids, which is not a good idea. Just use a new lid every time, but cheap enough. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching, and folks, you have a good day. Enjoy. Bye-bye.